Greg, last week I told a short story about our first base player at my daughter's softball team, and just a real quick reminder: all the girls went out to play defense, and shortstop. My daughter was at pitcher, and everyone was in their positions, and the coach just turned around like, "Hey, where's first base?" And the other coach was like, "I think she went to the bathroom." They turned around and looked, and my wife and I were at the end of the dugout where we sit, and we both turned and looked in the dugout, and first base was back on her phone, slumped over, texting, just lost in her text. So it got me to thinking, what can we talk about on the show to try to minimize device distraction for families and stuff like that. So I thought that'll be a good show. We put it off last week for a more easygoing show since it was our first show back after a 2 week break. So we promised that we'll get back to our regularly scheduled program. So here we are this week, and we're going to be talking about limiting device distraction, at least for the devices we manage. What do you think?
Nope, I think that sounds good.
Okay. So if you're not sure, you stumbled on this show by mistake, this video by mistake. This is Gadgets for Families, and this is a tech show where you get two grandpas talking about tech. And this week, Grandpa is going to tell you to put that phone down and get to your chores.
Or at least go outside, right? At least get out of the house.
No, go and cut the grass. Put the phone down, go and cut the grass.
My grandkids are a little bit young to be cutting the grass, Jason.
No, you're never too young.
Although they will sit on the riding lawnmower with me.
Right.
So
Right. As long as you can start it, you can ride it. So, all right. Don't forget to stick around after the show for the post show. And Greg and I again are going to show our age and talk about some classic TV shows. They always talk about the shows the toys that made us, or the food that made us, the cartoons that made us. These are the TV shows that made us. These are some of our summer pastimes, right? Remember during the summer from school, we spent late nights just up all night watching these shows and stuff like that. So they were a big part of our childhood, and that's going to be a fun
That's
episode.
on my list to talk about because unlike you kids today, we didn't have screens with us all the time. So
Right.
we had to work at it to get in front of a screen.
Yeah, we had to make sure that all of our chores were done. Everything that needs to be done was in the home. Everything in the home needed to be done was done, and then we can finally sit down and relax and not binge watch, because that wasn't a thing of binge watching these shows. I remember at the most maybe 2 episodes back to back, and then a different show. But we'll get into that later.
But that's because they weren't all available. They only came out once a week, or if you were watching the last season, you might be able to watch reruns like one a night, maybe.
Yep. That's how it went.
Yeah,
especially
these kids
with Star
don't
Trek.
Understand what we're talking about. What do you mean the whole season's not available at once? Which Jason embraces. He binge watches everything.
Right. The moment I was able to start binge watching, I don't even watch shows weekly like that anymore. I just wait for the end of the season and binge watch the whole thing. So these kids, they're not the only ones that change.
Yeah, fair.
All right, but before we get to anything, guys, I just want to thank everyone for subscribing and liking the videos and the shorts. If you're new to the show, or if you're watching right now and you haven't hit the subscribe button, then what's wrong with you? You're missing out on some really good stuff. Hit that button right now. Hit subscribe, hit like, and share the video out with anyone you think that can benefit from watching us two old men ramble on about technology and stuff. So thanks everyone for that. Let's do some catch up, Greg.
Wait a minute. I got a question. Is rambling a superpower?
It is. It becomes a really strong talent when you pass 40.
Okay, got it. So it's not really it is a superpower, but it's not a unique superpower.
No, it's not. It's a skill that most people can build. You got to practice at it. But yeah, rambling is I believe you become a professional when you reach those 60s and 70s. You become a professional rambler then. So I'm still working on it. But how are things going this week, Greg? If we're going to catch up real quick, I know you mentioned some progress earlier with the house sale. What's going on now? You got everything boxed up, and are you living out of a suitcase yet, or not
It
yet?
is chaos
Right.
at my house. I mean, you can see my walls are completely bare now. At least last
Yep.
week they had some lanyards with pins on them, but this isn't the only room that's like that. And I'm sure there's an echo. I apologize, but I just can't do anything about it right now. We're in such
Right.
chaos. I've got boxes in the garage on one side that go to one storage, on part of that side that go to another storage. I've got boxes on the other side and stuff that goes in the yard sale we're doing in a week and a half. And then out in my big shed, I've got the
Mm-hmm.
exact same sort of setup. So yeah, we're kind of in chaos mode right now. I mean, the only thing left in my bedroom is my TV and
Mm-hmm.
our clothes and our bed pretty much. I mean, it's interesting. And just a preview for next week's episode, I want to talk about how we can use technology to declutter and get over this habit we all have, even if you don't think you're a pack rat, but this habit that we
Yep.
all have to accumulate stuff. I've made a couple of trips to our landfill, and every time I go out there, I just think of how much money we wasted on things that got used once and
Yep.
now never will get used again. So that'll be the episode next week. But the most positive thing is, I've been talking about wanting to transition to this RV life, right? Where I'm living in the RV. And
Right. Or a
last
tiny
night
home.
yep. Well, at least for now, it'll be RV because last night we paid the deposit and reserved a spot starting in August at
Okay.
a long-term RV park in southern
Okay.
Utah
So
where
the
we're
deal
going.
went through.
So
I
yeah,
remember you telling me about that. You just submitted the application and stuff, so everything is
yep.
good then. All right.
Yeah, everything was good. I had to ask a few more questions because I kind of didn't expect it to go as fast as it did. I thought we would get close to August and then they would say, hey, we're going to have an opening. You're next on the list. Pay your deposit.
Right.
But the manager already knows they have a few coming up at the end of August. And so, I asked a whole bunch of questions via email. I called and
Mm-hmm.
talked to the lady, and she was great because she's like, oh, yeah, I'm just on my lunch. I'm like, oh, just tell me to call back later. I'm happy to call back. She said, no, it's fine. So, yeah,
Okay.
we've got that down. So that's one thing off my plate, right? I now
Right.
know where I'm going to live. So, yeah, now it's just a matter of figuring out how to get from here to there. So hopefully we'll
Right.
list the house in the next couple of weeks, do that yard sale, and then be ready to list it. So
Okay.
apologies for the audio. It's just I could hear the echo in the podcast version last week, not so much in the video. So I'm hoping the video is still good this week. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you sound fine, but again, I'm listening on probably the lowest quality that I could possibly listen on right now with these old earpods. But yeah, last week's shows were fine. So
well, that's the downside to these Maxes that I have is you hear
everything, right?
everything. Yeah.
All right.
So
So I remember you sending me the show for next week, the topic for next week, and I remember I was pulling a dolly full of Coke, Sprite, and water across the sidewalk by this church has big oak trees by it, so the roots, so it's all uneven and all unleveled. And I remember seeing a preview on my watch of the message, and wasn't really sure what you meant because I deal with being a pack rat a lot, and
ugh.
I was like, well, do you mean like, and you remember my reply back was, so you mean like digitizing all of those old instruction manuals and just all the documentation from different products and stuff we buy? And you were like, yeah, but we can actually go deeper than that. So I look forward to that. I think that's going to be a really good episode, a really fun conversation. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely include some tips that I use here in the house because I really struggle with letting things go. So, Greg, if we're going to talk about some current stuff, you have some really good news for everyone that I saw. Yeah, yeah,
So I put this in here. I saw this today and I thought, oh, Jason's going to feel so much better.
yeah,
Apple has announced an event for the morning of May 7th. Now, we all
yeah.
assume that it's going to be an iPad focused event. And actually, the main artwork has an Apple Pencil on there.
Yep.
So we're probably getting a new Apple Pencil too, which would be awesome. But it's called Let Loose.
Yep.
I'm super excited about that. It's at 7 a.m. Pacific time. So yeah, I mean that's great for us because we record at about 7:30 Pacific time, or no, 8:30 Pacific time. So our
Yep.
plan for this is to watch the event. It'll be available for everybody again, 7 a.m. Pacific time on Apple's website.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Jason might get his wish that they're going to be available immediately because I think that might be why they're doing it so early.
Yep.
And then I'll give Jason 15 minutes to hurry up and place an order. And then we'll move right into recording. So I'm super excited about this, Jason. And I know you are. And maybe those headaches and shakes and everything you've been having from your iPad withdrawals will start to go away a little bit.
Right, right. Hopefully. So we had to avoid talking about this before the show because I saw it, was immediately excited, and then right when we jumped on, because we talk a little bit before we start recording, we had to say let's stop and let's get this on the show before we start really talking it through, right? So we hit record, and here we are. So what I'm seeing, this is my Warshak test, interpretation, but there's 6 different logos, Apple logos for this thing, and I'm seeing different things when I look at these logos. So I'm thinking, we know this is going to be an iPad event, right? Like we mentioned on the show a few weeks ago, or maybe last month, that this wasn't going to be fly everyone out and have an on-stage keynote like they always do for big products, but it was going to be similar to that Scary Fast event, right? When they announced the new MacBooks, the new MacBook Pros, and the new M3 chip. So this is going to be similar to that. It's pre-recorded. They already know it's already recorded, right? They or either they're recording it now as we speak and finalizing everything. So the release that they sent is, I'm seeing 6 different Apple logos, and they all have different things. The one that Greg mentioned has a hand holding an Apple Pencil, and it looks like he's drawing some notes or being productive or whatever. The next one to that one, Greg, and again, this is my interpretation. It's a Warshak test. What do you see? Does that not look like music notes? An Apple logo built around music notes.
Like a treble clef. You're talking about the one that's
Right.
kind of blue and black and swirly.
Right. The one in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
top right-hand corner. So to
That could be
me,
cool.
yeah, it looks like music notes. The first one, the one on the top left, looks like a real like heavily like digital kind of design to it. Still art, still based around creativity. That one looks real artistic to me, right?
Yeah, I like that. Going back to the one on the upper right, I hope this isn't true, but one of the things that I think some of these do is imply colors, but we know that they don't like to put color on the Pro devices.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that upper right one is not a representation of the only 2 colors we're going to get on the Pro model, which would be their midnight, which they've started to put on some Pro stuff, and
Right.
then whatever their version of space gray
Oh, that
black.
is that color. Yep. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
could. You're right. You're
no.
right. It could be it. I'll be up for a black iPad or space.
Yeah,
What do they
but
call it? Space Midnight or whatever they call it.
yeah, I want either the left one, which is a green, or I want the green that's down in the bottom right one that looks like a whole bunch of fruit making up an apple.
Right.
Those are
And
the
I'm gonna get
colors I
to.
want to see in the Pros.
So I'm gonna get to that one. I'm
All right.
doing my Warshak test now.
All right.
So the bottom left, I don't really have an opinion on. But you did just mention those colors, and I see a lot of colors in that. So that one may not be
It
the
kind of looks
one.
like some of the stuff that Procreate does in their logos.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see that now. So the bottom one in the middle and the bottom row. Doesn't that remember when they announced the MacBook Air? Doesn't that look like the style of Apple logo that they used when they announced the Air? All of those years ago, you got to think back. And the heavy focus was on the MacBook Air and stuff. This was the lettering that they used only in Apple logo form.
Hmm.
To me, that's
Okay.
what it looks like. So if you take a second and Google those old MacBook Air announcements and stuff like that, this was the logo that they used. So I think this is implying that one of those iPads is going to be an Air. which we already know from the rumors and stuff that there's going to be a 12-inch iPad Air.
Right.
It's not going to get the Retina screen, and it's probably going to have some of the internal stripped down a bit to basically what the current M2 iPad is supposed to be. Those are the rumors. We don't know for sure, but I believe that's implying that this is going to be a iPad Air. So we move over to the last one, and it looks like, and again, this is my opinion. We don't know for sure, but you said it looks like a bunch of fruit and vegetables and stuff like that. What it looks like to me is that it's zoomed in or like a microscopic um, clip. You know, when you look at they look at specimens or something microscopically. That's what it looks like. So I think that that's implying like a heavy focus on scientific things. You know what I mean? Something scientific. So maybe some tools and things like that, even if it's not health related, but more scientifically geared, precision like tools to help people be more productive in those fields. You know what I mean? Because you're right, it does
Yeah.
look like fruit and vegetables too, but it also looks like microscopic views of, you know, slices of something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a traditional like Apple logo or something like that. So that's what I'm thinking. Heavy focus on productivity, heavy focus on digital design, heavy focus on music and creativity as far as musicians and stuff go. An iPad Air in the middle, and then a heavy focus on scientific and precision like tools and stuff like that. So I'm excited. I don't know, many times when Apple has given us so many different versions of a logo for a specific event. So I think they all have some meaning. What do you think?
I just think it's funny to listen to everybody do this, and then when we get to it, they meant absolutely nothing.
Right.
Right.
Right. The colors meant nothing.
So
The speculation meant nothing. And yeah. Going back mostly especially like some of the guys that we watch, right? The insiders, seeing how
yeah,
wrong they are when Tim Cook comes out on the stage and says this is what it is. Yeah, that's always fun. But that's part of it.
I'm excited that they're actually doing something. I mean, we didn't think they were actually going to do an event. It's almost like they're so late now that they probably had to. They probably had to do something, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm excited that they're doing it, and we're going to talk about something else where I just appreciate that Tim Cook understands our show, listens to our show,
He
and
listens to it.
schedules things around our show. So,
Right.
yeah.
Including
So,
fixes.
yeah, we'll talk about that one in a minute. But so go back and listen to our show where we were talking about the iPad rumors. It's back a couple of episodes.
Yep.
And then definitely tune in on the 7th. Now we'll record right after and drop the show that same day. So we won't wait till Wednesday to drop the show. So we'll have the show out in the afternoon of the 7th if all things
Yep.
align like they should. So
Yep, really looking forward to that. I'm really excited. This kind of made my day. So we mentioned friend of the show, Tim Cook, avid listener. Heard your complaints about the your HomePods not working.
yeah. I mean, he listens to the show, right? So
Yep.
we talked about it on the show, and magically my HomePod minis started doing what they were supposed to later that night. So they are now willing to take commands, even though they're connected to the Apple TV. I have no idea what it was. It was probably some sort of a server fix on the back end because we know they had this problem last year. But yeah, if your HomePod minis were having the same issue where they weren't responding to Apple Music commands, then try them again. And if they don't work, I'd suggest restarting them to start
Yep.
with, and maybe that'll do it. But yeah, mine are working. They're just like they're supposed to. And so, side note, getting ready to move, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, going to be in the trailer, at least in this trailer we have now, which isn't huge. And so even if we upgrade, this would probably still play out, although I may have to swap some HomePods. But I've got a 65-inch TV in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a 55-inch or whatever it is in my bedroom. The one downstairs, the big one, is connected to the two regular HomePods. And so
Right.
my daughter's like, yeah, if you're not going to hang on to that TV, I'll take it. And I said, do you want to take the HomePods too? And she's like, yeah, I'll take them. So my daughter's going to be in that new apartment with my best TV, with my best music devices. And I said, just know that if I upgrade the trailer and decide, I may swap you back for the regular HomePods for these minis that I have. And she's like,
Right.
okay. So,
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is our daughter's like, oh, yes, Dad. If you just insist, I'll take your brand new stereo HomePods. If you insist. But she's getting the TV because that was a question I forgot to ask last week. You had mentioned the kids were already divvying up all of dad's electronics and stuff, so she's getting the TV and the HomePods.
yeah, I mean, I've got both the TVs are going. I'm not hanging on to either one of them because neither
Not
one
even
of
the
them are
smaller
really.
one.
No, because we've got a TV in the trailer right now. It's not
Okay.
very good, but the one we have in our bedroom would be too big for the space. And
Mm.
then if we upgrade, it'll have TVs that are appropriately sized for the
Okay.
space that they're in, right? And so yeah, that's the thing with RVs. I mean, but the goal is not to spend ridiculous amounts of time in front of the TV anyway. I mean, my
Right.
Karen and I we watch stuff in the evening. Like there's a brand new season of Alone. I know it's not brand new, it's last season, but it finally dropped
Mm-hmm.
on Disney Plus, and so we're watching these people torture themselves to win money out in the wild.
Right.
Um, and they always do it in the places it gets super cold. So I'm like, nope. As soon as winter hit, as soon as that 3 feet of snow dropped in one night, I'd be like,
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Peace. Right. So,
Right.
but anyway, so yeah, I mean, that's, those are going. Wyatt will probably take the other TV that's in our bedroom because he has a
Mm-hmm.
much smaller, older one. And every time we're gone for like when we went on spring break, he
Mm-hmm.
hauled his PS5 upstairs to the 65-inch 4K
Okay.
TV, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Man, playing soccer on this is really nice."
Yeah.
I'm
That
like,
makes
"Yeah, I'll
sense.
bet."
That makes sense.
Compared to the, I think he's got if it's even 1080p, like 35-inch or something like
Oh
that. And
yeah.
I'm like,
That is a huge
"Yeah,
upgrade.
yeah, yeah."
So even wall mounted, because I told you, the space saving is a huge thing for us here. So even mounting them on the wall, you still don't think you have the space for it. At least the 55-inch, not the
They all
65
are
or the
mounted
or
on
the
the
80.
wall. Everything in the
Okay,
trailers would be mounted on. Some of them are on what they call televators because space is at a premium, right? And so
right.
you press a button and it goes down in the cabinet, or you have cabinet or counter space, or you press the
Okay.
button and it comes up. But yeah, no, I definitely won't. And in the place where we'll probably watch it the most often, which is we're going to bed or something like that and want to watch
Mm-hmm.
an episode of a show or something like that, definitely wouldn't have room for it in a bedroom like that. So,
Okay.
but we'll see. I mean, this is all one day at a time, and just be sitting at my daughter's apartment. And if I decide I need that 75 or that 65-inch, then I'll just go take it.
Yeah. Right. Right. She won't be too far.
No, no, no. So anyway, sorry, sidebar, but yeah,
Yeah. No, no, it's cool. It's cool. So the last bit of follow up that we had today was last week when I was talking about what's going on with Pop Life. I kept saying that the biggest park and the park that houses the Houston Zoo and the Miller Theater and the Japanese gardens, I kept saying Buffalo Bayou Park, but I misspoke. It is Herman Park, not Buffalo Bayou. And you have to forgive me. We had events at all three of the biggest parks last week. It was Buffalo Bayou, Herman Park, a couple at Herman Park, and Discovery Green. And it's just they all seem to run together. So when you got a long week like today after we record, I don't even have time to do my usual online stuff. It's out to the shop and to start preparing for the events this week. So yep, forgive my mistake. Most people who are the folks that listen in Houston, you probably automatically knew that I was wrong. Anyone outside of Houston, I did misspoke. I apologize. It's not Buffalo Bayou, even though Buffalo Bayou has a pretty big and beautiful park. Herman Park is the biggest park here in Houston. So, but there you go.
well, I'm going to judge for myself this weekend.
Yeah. So, well, we'll talk about that offline. I know we had some big
Yeah,
plans
yeah.
or whatever, but I think those plans changed. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, they're not going to work out. But we were hoping, I'll just tell folks, we were hoping to record a live episode with the two of us together, because I actually need to go to Houston a couple of times over the next month for Dustin's graduation and end of year stuff. And I have so much going on. I just can't fit one more thing in my brain. So we'll make it happen at some point. Dustin's going to be down there at least for another year, so I'm sure it won't be the last time. Actually, the University of Utah plays at U of H football in the fall. So that might be a better opportunity to do that. So Dustin's supposed to be chasing tickets for that. So Dustin, if you're listening and you haven't chased down those tickets yet, I know you're focused on this weekend's recital because you have to pass it to graduate, but I need tickets. So
first things first. So something a little more important, and that's graduated. So
yeah. I'll check that out. I'm excited, and we'll report back next week. I'll let you know what I think. And
it sounds like fun. I'm looking forward to it. So let's get into this main topic today, Greg.
Sounds good.
So remember, just a reminder, folks, we're going to be talking about minimizing device distractions, right? And this is in just the devices that you manage, right? Again, like we always say, we don't parent parents here at Gadgets for Families. We just like to share what we do for our family members and the devices that we manage in our family of devices. That we like to share these tips and stuff with you guys. But again, we make no opinions on how people parent or what you do with your own children and your own devices that you manage. But, we just like to share these tips. It's about sharing information. We don't want to keep all this knowledge to ourselves. So, yeah, Greg, anything you want to add to that disclaimer?
Nah, I mean, it's hard. Everybody has to make their own choices. There is a lot of research coming out now. Because now we've had these smartphones and been addicted to them long enough.
Yes.
But that talks about how screen time, phones, and in particular, social media. I mean, I know folks use social media to keep in touch and all that kind of stuff, but there are so many studies coming out that are showing the negative impact of all of these things on not just the young kids today, but even young adults that grew up with this stuff. And there's stuff linking the age that a person gets a smartphone to increased chances of mental struggles and stuff like that. So you can go find all of that. I don't want to dive into that first because I'm not qualified. But just you've got to think about this stuff. And my biggest message to everybody here would be to be deliberate. Don't just let what's going to happen. Don't use, I got to be careful how I say this. Don't use screens as permanent or long-term babysitting. Sometimes you have to do it. Like if you're working from home and somebody's home sick or something like that, and you've got this meeting that you can't be distracted for. So yes, you might need to hand somebody a tablet or turn on a TV show. But yeah, I mean, be deliberate about this. Do your research, be educated, and make decisions. And then I'm going to jump in with my number one, which is explain this stuff to your kids or those that you're trying to work with on this kind of stuff. Help them understand why you're doing this. Don't just say it's bad for you. Help them understand that they need other things like being outside, and they need to do chores. As much as we laugh about that, they need to learn how to do chores. So teach them why you're doing this, work with them. And I think I mentioned this way early on, that Instagram actually has some pretty good controls where you can sit down as a parent with your teenager or whatever and help them understand which controls you're turning on, which ones you're not, and why you're doing it. And I think that's a really positive thing. I wish more things did that. And Jason's going to give you some really good suggestions here in a minute that you can sit down side by side with them and turn these things on and explain why. So there you go.
Right. So you mentioned something, and again, I don't want to get too philosophical about this, right? We switch from being real, like the instruction manual show and all of that. Listen to those early episodes. You'll see what I mean by that. We just like to have lighter conversations now. So not to get too heavy or too philosophical, but addiction is addiction, right? And what I've noticed over the last few years, that addiction is addiction when there's something that's, too taboo, the things that traditionally have been identified as being addictive. People have a pretty good handle on ways to prevent those. But then lately, I've been noticing that there's these socially accepted addictions that because they're so socially accepted, everyone just says, man, that's just the way things are. No, addiction is still addiction, whether it's alcohol or Instagram. Uh,
or overworking
right,
and
right, exactly.
neglecting other things, right? I mean, I'm with you. Here in the US, we've accepted certain things. We've accepted the fact that you may have to work 60 hours a week and neglect everything else in your life in order to have
Yep.
a career, whatever you want to call it, right? And we've accepted that people just spend forever on their phones. I was listening to ATP and they were asking how long it took each of them before they interacted with their phone in the morning. And it was a
Right.
super interesting conversation. I'm not judging how long it takes somebody to pick up a screen in the
Mm-hmm.
morning, right? But it's super interesting that we're even having those kinds of conversations. And I
Right.
think you're right on, Jason. Socially and culturally, we've said it's just the way it is.
Right. These addictions are fine. Don't get on
Yeah.
crack, but these, checking your Instagram first thing in the morning when you open your eyes is fine. They're the
Yeah.
same.
And to me, one of my pet peeves is when people don't live up to their fullest potential, right? Which is one of the
Yes.
reasons I'm so hard on myself and very hard on those around me sometimes.
Right.
And in my opinion, anything that prevents you from living up to your fullest potential is a potential addiction, right? Whether that
Yes.
be health. I'm so addicted to food
Yes.
that I've compromised my health, or I'm so addicted to exercise that I've compromised my job or my
Yep.
family. I'm so addicted to my career and my VP title that I'm willing to miss all of the things.
Yep.
I'm so addicted to my screens that I neglect those around me. I had a church leader one time tell a story. They got on an airplane and there was a young couple
Mm-hmm.
that got on. This was years and years and years ago. And a young couple got on and was sitting up in front of him. And he could tell that the wife wanted to talk to her husband. Young couple, right? We're not talking about old people like my wife and I that are used to each other and kind of,
Yep.
sometimes we need a break from each other, right? But all he could tell that all she wanted to do was interact with her husband, and all he had was his game in
Right.
front of him, right? And playing on the
Right.
console thing in front of him. So again,
Right.
that may sound preachy, that may sound judgy. I'm not judging. You have to decide what's best for you in your life. But I would just ask you to think, if it's not helping me live up to my fullest potential, what do I do about it? And if it's
Yep.
not going to help my kids or grandkids, in our case,
Yep.
live up to their fullest potential, what do I do about it? Man,
Yep.
you said you weren't getting philosophical, but I sure did.
Well, I think that's part of it, right? We have to play our role in it, and as men, as fathers, as grandfathers, that's just we have to do that sometimes. So sorry if we took too long on that little rant, but let's jump into it. Let's jump into some lighter or more easier tips that parents or device management can do to minimize device distractions. So my first
Jay,
pick,
how about you drop these in and I'm just going to add on if
yeah,
that
sounds
works for
good.
you.
Sounds good. So, Greg, you heard of focus modes on the phones, right? Most
Yep.
people heard of focus modes. So this is what I call a physical focus mode, and this is nothing fancy. This has been around for years, but it's basically a dedicated workspace, right, for certain tasks. If it's reading time and you want your child to, or your family member to focus on reading, then create them something like a little reading nook or something like that, a little table, or if you have the space, not everyone has this space. It can be a corner of the room, it can be the kitchen table, it can be anywhere, but that space is dedicated to that certain task, right?
Throw a beanbag in the corner
Yeah,
and call it
yeah.
good, right?
Throw a bean bag, a little bookshelf with the little books and stuff on there, even if
Do they
they're
even know
on their
what
tablet.
beanbags are?
I think so. I think so
Okay, all
because
right, all
that,
right.
yeah, those are still around to a certain
Okay.
extent. Now they've taken a different form. Now they're shaped like unicorns and
Mm.
horses and My Little Ponies and stuff, but they're still bean bags.
Instead of just that brown leather thing that all of the white
Right.
stuff popped out of eventually.
The round ball, yep, instead of
Yeah.
that. But yeah, they're taking a different form, but kids still use bean bags, but now they're way cooler than back when we were younger. But something like that will help them train their brain to say, okay, when I'm sitting on this bean bag or I'm sitting in this chair and I'm in this corner, this is reading time. This is my 30 minutes to an hour a day where I'm not playing the dress up game. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not texting my friends, but it's time to read. And it gets their brains into like I said, it just trains their brain to say,
Yep.
when I'm here, I'm reading. Greg mentioned a cool new feature that's on the Vision Pro that puts you in different environments and stuff. So, you know, if you're it's time to be productive or it's time to think, you can put yourself in the Grand Canyon or something like that. Or if you
Yeah.
want something more relaxing, more serene, to be able to meditate and read scriptures or do something a little more relaxing, you can put yourself by a cabin lake with fog and stuff over the lake and things like that. So this is basically the physical version in your home of that. Right.
Yeah.
Really, really cool feature. I'm really looking forward to utilizing something like that whenever I get a Vision Pro or something like that. But now a little more practical, just setting up a little dedicated workspace that will go a long way in helping minimize device distraction. Even though they're on the device reading, it minimizes that distraction from texting with friends and things like that. So I'm
Yeah.
calling it physical focus modes, Greg. What do you think about
Yep.
that?
I love it. And you've talked about for others, but I would say for us too. I mean, you have a pretty clear
Right,
distinction between work because you got to go out to your shop to pop
right,
popcorn.
right.
But for anybody that works on a computer from home, I think it's important to set some boundaries. Now, the nice thing about a laptop is I can work here at my desk. I can go sit on the couch. I
Yep.
could sit on my bed. I could go sit out in the hammock out back, and I do all of the
which
above.
is which is the coolest thing ever. I love when you
Yeah.
send pictures and you got the cool little fire pit and things out there. Yes,
Yeah.
I want that.
But when I am done for the day with work, because almost, and this is the other reason why I really want an iPad still, but when I'm done for the day with work, my laptop comes back into my office
Hmm.
and I close the door. Now I have to close the door because otherwise I have grandkids that run in and like to get into my stuff that's in my office, right? But
Yeah.
the laptop goes back in my office and I don't pull it out unless I have a specific thing that I need to do with it. So I think physical separation, especially if you're work from home, if
Hmm.
you've got a family and you've got a demanding job, you're going to need to figure out how to create some physical separation so that your brain can tell your
Yeah.
body it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have
Yeah.
to, or the body tell the brain, I don't care which way you want to do it. Right. So I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. So this may not be for everyone. This last, and we're still talking about dedicated workspace. This is definitely not cost effective for most people. Greg and I love technology. We spend a little extra on our. We don't have the habits that other people have, right? We don't buy fancy shoes and we don't drink and things like that. So all of that extra money that we save from not having these other hobbies, we spend on our technology. So I'm going to recommend this, but this is definitely not for everybody. But Greg has mentioned a few times that he has dedicated devices for different tasks. And I do too, to a certain extent, even though my main driver, my iPad, is gone. Greg has an iPad mini that he loves to read. He reads scriptures, he reads his novels, his books and things on, and it's pretty much just for reading. I think I'm going to lose my connection here unless it switches to cellular. My power went out. Did you lose me, Greg?
No, you're still there.
Okay. So it may have switched to cellular. So we're going to keep the show rolling. But yes, I lost power.
You're just going to see a black screen for Jason because he doesn't have any light. So,
But so a dedicated device, right? And again, as an example, Greg uses his iPad Mini for all of his reading and stuff like that. When he wants to be more productive, he switches to his MacBook. And the same with me. If I have a simple, quick task, I can do it on my phone. I don't particularly like that small screen, even though it's a beautiful screen on my phone. Um, Most of my heavy lifting is done on my iPad when I have one. Lately, I've been on this MacBook Air, which is terrible because it's an older Air. But I switch depending on the task that I need to accomplish. I switch devices. So maybe, if you're able to afford something like that, if it's within your means, to have a dedicated tablet for reading or just for schoolwork or something like that, and then have your children do gaming and stuff on a system. That way, you say, I don't want you sitting on your phone just playing games. When it's gaming time and you have time for gaming, I want you to play that, to do, have your gaming time on the system or on something like that. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
okay. Rick, I admit I can't see the next one because I'm without power. You want to read the next one off to us? It'll
Yeah, we're
remind me.
gonna switch the host and show title. The show must go on, right?
Yeah, the show must go on.
But kudos to Riverside
Right, right.
that we're still recording, and if this works out right, I mean, kudos to them for
Yeah,
how they set this up, and kudos to Apple that the iPhone didn't skip a beat.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And I'm showing 98% at
yep,
the upload. So we'll see how it
yeah,
comes out, the finished product, because usually when the power goes out in the neighborhood, the cell phone tower powers go out too. So
yeah, yeah. Houston is not known for having the right amount of backups.
right,
So,
right.
so the next one, I think, which you were just about to lead into anyway, which is let's combine screen time and focus mode. Let's talk about those two, about how
Yes.
those can help limit distractions.
Right. So screen time, for the folks who hadn't heard the older show that we did and they're not familiar with it, is basically parental controls. Right. It's Apple's marketing department came up with a fancy name instead of calling it parental controls. It's just called screen time. So what it does is it allows you to manage different aspects of on your child's phone, or not even your child, on your family's, because that's what they call a group of devices on your
Yep.
family's phone, our devices, right? This applies to the iPad, anything with the iCloud account on it. So you can limit things like how much time they spend on particular apps, right? Who they can communicate with, who are they texting throughout the day. You can, manage their contact list. You can share your contact list with it. You can limit how long they have to text and call these certain contacts, as well as things like what websites they visit and things like that. So I mentioned a funny story, and I have another one. You're gonna get a good laugh out of this. But I mentioned my son, how he figured out a way to bypass
Oh
his
no.
YouTube limit. Right, we limited him. We really have to limit YouTube in my household without talking about the reasons why, or going too far into it. We can see a direct correlation between their behavior and the videos they watch on YouTube. We just see it like immediately, or we can see it within days. So we really limit YouTube in our house, in our home. And again, I'm not saying every parent has to do that. That's just what works best for us.
That's the one app that I have a limit on for myself,
YouTube,
that I have a
right,
screen time
right,
limit that pops up and says, "Hey, you've exceeded it." Now I can override it, and I do a lot,
yes,
but at least I know it's there. But I don't want to go on too much of a sidebar here. But when I was in middle school, I was able to find a correlation between the kind of music I was listening to
hmm
and my behavior. And I
yes,
got into some pretty heavy metal kind of stuff.
okay,
And it didn't take me very long to realize that my behavior went the opposite direction of what I wanted it to. And then I stopped listening to that music, and my behavior started to revert back to
right,
more normal for me, right? So
right,
I don't, there is a correlation. The what
yep,
goes through our eyes and through our ears probably has more influence than most other things on us. So I don't
yeah,
think you're off base there. So
yeah.
anyway,
So just a reminder to everyone, my son figured out that even though I had the YouTube app blocked, he went to add in the Safari settings, added YouTube as an always allow site. So when I was seeing YouTube, his YouTube usage still lingering, I thought, well, maybe I changed the setting, or I need to go back in and change the setting. No, he added it to always allow. So I told my wife, I didn't know whether to be proud or upset that he figured
the
out.
both.
Yeah, yeah, well, both. And yeah, quickly we corrected that, and I got him back on the limit. So back to screen time. That's pretty much what it is, right? Is
Yeah.
parental control. So again, not every parent has to set these up, but just try it out for a little while. Try it out for a bit and see if you don't notice a difference in their behavior, in the way that they speak to their peers, and the way that they speak to your spouse or just adults in general. And just try it. If you like it,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with testing out new things. So
Once this came out, we used it for our kids.
right.
And I don't use it for the grandkids because they don't get their tablets unless we give them to them right now.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a
Physical
little bit different because
screen
they're,
time.
yeah. I mean, it's a little different, right? And they don't have a phone that's just kind of with them all the time. So they're just way too young for it. So,
Yeah.
but we did this with our kids. And even when Wyatt hit the age where I was like, hey, I'm willing to remove these, he's like, no, leave them in place. They're off now, right? And
Hmm.
now that he's 19 years old, so
Yeah.
he can do with that. But he left them on a lot longer than I anticipated him doing that. And some of that is because of conversation. At least I hope it's because of conversations we had explaining why it was important and him wanting to continue to try and manage stuff and not let it manage him.
Yeah.
So these are great. This is one of the best things that Apple has done is give parents or device managers the ability to deal with some of this stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it's improved. It almost improves with every update. Now, if we're talking about the level of technical knowledge diving into screen time, I think it's pretty advanced. I don't think it's for the average user or the passive user, right? Because there are a lot of settings, there are a lot of overlapping settings, right? You set one thing and you set another rule and it kind of overlaps that rule. So, but I think if you practice with it, if you dive in and look at the settings, I think it's something that the average user can pick up pretty easy, right? The learning curve is pretty easy, but I think initially it may seem a little overwhelming, which kind of, I think, discourages a lot of people from diving into it, because I recommend screen time to a lot of people and they say, you know what, I looked at that, or it recommended it because it recommends it in the tips and stuff. It just seemed too complicated to really get into.
yeah, but like for me, my YouTube one is super simple. It's the only
Yeah.
thing I have turned on in screen time.
Yeah.
Right. Other than tracking how much time I use my screen, but I don't have downtime. Excuse me.
Hmm.
So literally you just go in, you put app limits, you choose the app, say how much you want it to have and go. So I think it's gotten simpler, but yeah, I mean, go in and play with it. Play with it on your own device where you can just
Yes.
simply tap in the passcode and override it. And then when you get it to where it feels like, okay, that's what's going to work for my kids, great. Also realize that most kids will try to do what Jason did,
Hmm.
but not all of them are going to be successful. And realize that, yes, that was a pretty clever workaround, but it still came out in the end. So,
Right.
I mean, the reality is you can't do everything to prevent this kind of stuff or to restrict this kind of stuff, but you can do some things, and that's probably enough for most people. So,
Right.
especially if you have the conversation with them and explain why you're doing what you're doing, they're more likely to, if they understand the why, they're more likely to
Yeah.
resist trying to find a workaround. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Okay, and remind me to tell you later about our same old cat and mouse game. Before we wrap up, I'll tell you the new story about
okay.
this kid. So, what's next on the list?
Good old fashioned boundaries.
Right. There's no substitute. There's no technical substitute for good old fashioned. Just sit down and talk to your kids. And Greg, you mentioned this every time we have a show and we talk about the technology that you can do to try to protect your kids and try to protect your family and things like that, you always mention this. So I figure we'll have some overlap with this one when you picked your tips, but just sitting down and talking to your kids about why these rules need to be in place, why these certain, I say rules, rules kind of puts a bad name on it. This is just these are just life tips. This is how we should be. And again, raise your children how you want, but this is how we would want our kids to raise their children, right? This is how we would want them to grow up and to be how to function in real world is setting boundaries and expectations on yourself. So there's really no way around it but sitting down and talking to them about these things,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And, and that will benefit because, we've talked about putting limits on the router, right? You can't get
Mm-hmm.
out to adult websites and stuff like that. But as soon
Yep.
as they go to somebody else's house, even if it's
Yep.
not on their device, they may have access to it. So, yeah, I
Yep.
mean, all of the technology in the world is not going to prevent them from getting to stuff you don't want them to get to if they're
Mm-hmm.
really determined to do so. And the best way to help them realize it's not a good idea is to have a conversation. I mean, think about things like underage drinking.
Yep.
One of the best ways to deal with that is to constantly be having conversations with your kids about why it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not judging, right? Again,
Yeah.
that's not my place, but there's
Yeah.
studies that talk about that. If you don't want your kids to drink, talk to them about it. That's the
Yep.
best way to prevent it.
Yeah. Yeah. And show them examples. Show them
Yeah.
examples. I know we always say, we like to shield our children from seeing bad things and seeing the results of some of these bad things. But man, I show my children. I talk to them all
Yeah.
the time. I talk to them about family members and friends that I've had growing up. And I always, and they hear me say it a lot. This is not something I've heard. This is something that I know. This is something that I've experienced firsthand myself. I didn't read this in a book. I didn't see this example on a YouTube video or something. This is something I lived through. So I'm telling you that these are the results from this type of choice or whatever. So
Right.
yeah, just good old fashioned conversations, sitting down with them, setting these boundaries yourself, setting them with them and explaining to them why you're setting these things is probably the best thing to eliminate these types of device distractions and stuff.
Yep. Well, let me just wrap up with two more then, Jay.
Okay.
First one, don't think that moving from one screen to another is a good idea. So don't say, "Hey, you're done with your phone time," and then just let them go binge watch 4 hours of TV.
Right.
Probably not going to get the effect that you want.
Right.
But then this one's easier for me as a grandpa than it was as a dad. But invest in analog. And what I mean by that is, like, we've had all of our kids' birthdays or grandkids' birthdays over between December and um, April, or all three of the grandkids' birthdays.
Okay. Wow, they are
And
pretty close
yes,
together.
yeah, grandpa's the one that got them their iPads for sure,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because tech grandpa. But we, like, one of them got a remote control car, and the car we
Nice.
got is designed to be one that you run outside. So it's a monster truck. It's a um,
Like Bigfoot or
no, it's the shark one. Can't remember what megalodon or whatever it is,
right,
right?
right.
So it's designed to be run outside, and we buy camp chairs, so they want to go sit outside, and we have the fire pit, and they
Mm-hmm.
have scooters and bikes, which, man, they went nuts when we were down for spring break because we're in a campground, so people can't go fast. It's all flat. So boy, did they learn how to ride their bikes, right? I mean, so investing in that kind of stuff. And here's the thing, that's harder for a parent or a guardian
Yes.
because you can't just hand them something and say, "Okay, here you go." I mean, my parents, when I grew up, they used to just say, "Yeah, you want to go ride your bike for 4 hours? Just be
Right.
back before dinner," right? But
Yep.
that was a very, very different world than what we live in today. And so, you know, we'll talk about this a little bit next week, but in this process of me going through all of this stuff that we're throwing out, I realized that what I want to do is invest in experiences for my grandkids and my
Mm-hmm.
kids to a certain extent, although a little bit of that time has passed. So, instead of for Christmas buying a bunch of stuff that's going to get used and then yard sale or thrown away, we're
Right.
talking about what kind of an experience should we invest in? Is it time to do a big family vacation, which we were never very good at doing? So we're having those conversations, and then
Yeah.
moving down to this new location, there's a couple of different rec centers that the passes to those things are not cheap, right? I mean, you get
Yeah.
a really good rec center and you're going to pay for a whole family to be able to go. So we're talking about investing in those kinds of things. And that way, when my daughter's working and grandma and grandpa are watching the kids, or we've got sleepover with grandma and grandpa, we can go swimming for a couple hours or go to the rec center. Or another reason we're moving down to this part of Utah is because we can be outdoors pretty much year round, right? Much
Right.
easier than when it's 6 feet of snow and it's 0 degrees. So that's the other thing that comes into play here. And what I mean when I said be deliberate is think about those things that kids actually will want to do. I think we actually teach them to rely on their screens personally.
Yes. Yep.
If,
We do.
if, I mean, I can't tell you how much sidewalk chalk we go through in our house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're out using the chalk and then it gets left and it gets rained on, and yep, we go buy another box. We have a box of chalk that just sits in the camp trailer for that kind of stuff. And every time we go somewhere, every rock that they can find is colored in chalk. And so I think definitely screens have a place. We can't get around having screens and these devices in our lives.
Yeah.
But I think we can teach them that there's more out there and to use their imagination. And our oldest granddaughter will disappear for hours at a time, and she's just up in this room that we thought was going to be her bedroom but turned out not to be. But what we put in there was this little desk that we bought and a bunch of paper and her crayons and her markers and all that kind of stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll just come up and she's just been sitting in there for hours
Yeah.
drawing or coloring, right? So invest not only in the things but in the time that teaches them that there is something outside of the virtual world. The real world
Right.
is pretty darn amazing when you think about it.
It is. It is. You just gotta turn off that screen and go out and see it. So, did you have
Jay, do
one
you want
more?
to? No, that was it. Do you want to share
Okay.
your additional story? You said remind you to do it. Do you want to share one more story?
Yeah. I'll share it with everyone. So again, building off of the my son outsmarted me briefly for about 3 weeks, where he added YouTube to his always allow sites on Safari in the settings. Also, too, looking over my shoulder is how he discovered the screen time password. Right, I believe we were on a cruise. My wife was telling me. Well, no, she told me I told him what the screen time password was. I don't remember ever telling him, but anyway, I mentioned a few weeks ago that he was punished off of all of his devices. And not only that, I even took his room, right? He's not making
Ooh.
the grades that he should be making. And I said, hey, you can only sleep in my bed, but you come home from school, you put your backpack, and you sit at, we call it the conference table because he's always having a conference with the snacks and stuff in there. Like, you sit at the conference table, which is the kitchen table, and when it's time for bed, you go to bed. So we took all of his devices. Well, my wife discovered the other day when she went to the room, she says, hey, did you give him an old phone? I'm like, no, why would I give him an old phone? Because his phone is right here. His phone was right next to. So Greg and I both worked in IT for years. We mentioned it. And with that, we have tons of old iPhones laying around. And this little joker found one of my old iPhones and loaded his store your old electronics, especially when you have a child that you're trying to punish. And I thought he was taking his punishment pretty easy, but he wasn't. He had an old iPhone. It was an old, like, 8 Plus. Smashed to pieces. I mean, the screen is just smashed, like, terribly. Glass chipping off of it. But he found it in the little, I told you about the little server and some old hard drives and old routers and stuff in there. Well, he found an old iPhone in there. And yeah. So I don't know how long he's been doing it, but took that as well. So it's constantly cat and mouse. And I'm always talking about my son like he's a bad kid. He's not a bad kid at all. He's pretty sharp, which is why I get so down on him when he's making bad grades, right? Because his potential, he should be in GT classes.
Right.
And he allows these distractions. He loves to skateboard. He loves to hang out at the skateboard park with his friends. He works, for the company, and he makes his own money and stuff. He's 13 and he has so much money in his account. Sometimes I'm looking like, loan your dad $50 or something.
Yeah. You're buying dinner.
Yeah, you're buying dinner. He's a really good kid. So, when he does stuff like this, I have to balance between being angry, playing my role as a father, and letting him know, like, hey, dude, you know you're wrong. You know you shouldn't do stuff like this. And at the same time, being proud that he's so,
Yeah.
so versatile. So, But again, the problem solved. I took it from him, but now I have all the devices, and his grades are back up. He has
Yeah.
one class that he's pending now. That's like a 78 or something, and there's grades that are pending from the teacher. So basically, we're waiting on the teacher to get those grades in to get him back to passing, and he can have all of that junk back. So
Yeah.
the last week of it, I guess he couldn't take this last week, and he's like, let me set up this, this the old phone, and yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah.
And I think it's important. I mean, Jason, by the way, it's really cool. Every once in a while, you raise your wrist and I can see your watch face in the darkness. It's
So it
pretty
is.
awesome.
It is pretty dark in here.
Yeah.
I see me like sitting in the corner, but yeah, it is pretty
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I mean, we're telling you things that we've tried. Some have worked, some have
Yeah,
not worked. We're not perfect parents. And again, we are
yeah.
not judging any parents out there for the decisions that you have to make. I mean, even from one kid to another, I know that with my kids, I had different restrictions on some kids versus others. And, the whole joke about by the time you get to the last kid, there's no restrictions because you just don't care. It's not like that. But I was definitely less on top of Wyatt's stuff than I was his older siblings. And part of it
Hmm.
too was Wyatt flat out said, "Hey, I watched what my siblings did that pushed your buttons. I'm just not going to do it."
Right,
So,
right.
he learned too. So we're not perfect in any of this stuff. These are things that you can try. Really, you have to put in the effort to figure out what's best for you and your kids. And it'll be different. Like all of my grandkids are going to have some challenges that are different from what my kids had and different
Hmm.
from your kids. And so you got to be deliberate about this. We're just trying to give you information so you can say, hey, maybe that will help. And you might try 10 things and one works and 9 don't, but at least you'll have one thing that's working. So don't think that we're perfect parents on any of this because
Yeah,
we're not,
yeah.
for sure.
So that was all for that I had this week, Greg. That's pretty much a show. I think it was a pretty good conversation.
Yeah, it's too bad we can't see Jason through about half of it. But so if you're watching this on the video, we apologize because I mean, there's just nothing we could do, and we still want to do the post show, right, Jay?
Oh yeah, I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah, yeah. So apologize on the video. Just know that this was. I'm surprised this is the first time we've had this problem, considering how often the power goes out in Houston. To be honest,
Right,
so
right. Whenever the
yeah,
wind blows too hard, here the power goes out, and
yeah,
it had been pretty steady for a few years, but they changed the box in the back. I forget what it's called. They came and repaired it. Well, they didn't repair it. They replaced it totally new. And yeah, whenever it
yeah.
rains too hard or too light, and the wind blows too hard, the power's out again.
So yeah. All right, Jason,
All
you want to
right.
wrap us up?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week where we talk about the I'm thinking about a different show. We're going to talk about what are we
Next
talking
week,
about
we're
again?
going to talk about eliminating clutter and the accumulation of stuff. See, this is
That's
what
right.
happens. Jason's all discombobulated because he can't see what he's doing.
I
So
can't see my notes, and I'm excited about the iPad, and I'm thinking about
I
that
know
show.
he's just thinking 2 weeks out, 2 weeks out. Now, the cool thing is, Jason, I'll be back in Houston the end of that week for actual graduation. So I won't have a whole lot of time, but I might be able to connect with you Saturday morning again, especially if you get a
Right,
new iPad. So
right,
yeah,
right. So yeah, we'll definitely get together. You come by and grab some popcorn for the family and stuff, and yeah,
I got to try the Fruity Pebble because that's not one you sent me. So I got
yeah.
to try Fruity Pebble popcorn. So you better save me a bag this weekend.
I will. I will. All right. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Thanks, and stick around for the post show. Classic TV shows. Have a good one.